So thank you, first of all for coming out and taking time out of your evening to come and think and talk with me. Like Tom said, I am going to talk briefly, a little bit more than briefly, about all of this so that we're all starting on the same footing in terms of understanding the context. What is small-scale manufacturing? What can it do to contribute to a community, and why is it important? And then a little bit about how do we get it done. And then we're going to have a conversation. See, I already wrote up opportunities, so you understand where we're going. I want to hear from you guys about what you see in the world of the possible for Grants Pass. What are some of the assets that are already here? What else do you think is possible? Because I have to say, I've only been in the Valley for this week, and Grants Pass is beautiful. Your downtown is amazing, and sounds like it is growing and changing by leaps and bounds from month to month and year to year right now, and it is an amazing asset to continue to build upon. So with that, I'm going to wander. So first, anybody ever do origami? As a kid, as a grown-up? This is going to be interactive, in case you were wondering. Okay? Origami is the place I start. I'm not going to trip. I will not trip. Origami is the place I start because it's important to remember what it means to make things. So when I talk about small-scale manufacturing, I actually use the word manufacturing on purpose. But the thing I'm talking about is businesses where people make things. And I've had a chance this week to visit a number of businesses. Some of you might see yourselves up there in this slideshow. I've had a chance to visit with some local businesses that make things in your community. This is Rogue Roasters in their new space, right? They are a small-scale manufacturing business. They roast the coffee beans, they sell them there, they distribute them wholesale more broadly, they have a retail frontage. Small-scale manufacturers may or may not want to have a retail frontage. They may just want to do production, but they could do production downtown if they're small, or they could do it at home. This is Uber Herbal, also in downtown. And one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this is because most of the businesses that we see doing small-scale manufacturing are really small. They're predominantly fewer than 20 employees, and in fact, a lot of times they're fewer than 5 employees. And what this means is that we need to look at how we define small-scale manufacturing in a much more comprehensive way, because when people think of industrial or manufacturing, they're not usually thinking of breweries, right? Does anyone know where this one is? Climate City, right. It's okay to admit that you know where the brewery is. Right? This is small-scale manufacturing. They are a brewery on site with their restaurant. Right? And these are amazing assets for our communities. And so we have to think about who is involved in this part of the business sector in our community. These are people who have home-based businesses producing tangible goods that they sell to consumers or to other businesses. These are businesses that might want a retail front because they want to interact with folks and produce something on site. Or there are also businesses where they want a space just to do production, and they're going to sell through a local store, or they're going to only sell wholesale. All of those fall in the category, and they can be doing hardware fabrication. They can be doing textile work. They might be doing production and retail in the same space. They might be doing hardware prototyping and using 3D printers. All of those things fit into the category. And why is it important to me? Because it becomes an asset for our community. And my passion is about creating great places, about the personality of each community coming out, right? I love the work that I do, and I've done work with communities all over the country, and the thing that I find most exciting is exactly this, is getting to see the personality of a place, what makes it unique, what makes it special. And there are a lot of really special things about Grants Pass. So this is what we get, right? We get community. We get people coming together. We get people enjoying the things being made in their community, and we get good jobs in our community, right? We have lots of research that shows that the folks that are doing small-scale production are getting much higher wages than a retail job or a service job. And so we're also looking at, not always, The crowd in the front that produces stuff is like, I'm not so sure that's the case. But we have an opportunity to also provide folks with a route towards good employment with or without a college degree, with or without an advanced degree, and really grow businesses from our own community members that will stay here for the long haul. So the first point I want you to think about is that production, those businesses that are doing some kind of production and small manufacturing are really important to having a strong local economy, and they're important for strong neighborhoods. And that it's also key as part of a main street, to have a vibrant main street. And I'm going to talk in a little while what it means to have a main street. I'm going to talk about 4 different things this evening. One is trends. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on nationally, just so we can talk about what's going on here. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Main Street and try to be very clear about what it means to have a Main Street. And this really, when I talk about Main Street, you can also substitute downtown for it if you want, because you have a great cohesive area that is downtown. Then what's the community opportunity? Why is this something that a community might want to take advantage of? And then just start a few ideas about how to make it happen. And at that point is when we're going to really open the conversation. So, trends. Trends. Nationally, these are national trends. Within 20 years, 3/4 of all households will be households without children. 1/4 of all households will be single-person households. So where these people want to live, what services they need, will be completely different than 30 years ago. We also know from great surveys that young adults often, not always, but often, are predominantly picking a place to live and then figuring out what job they can get or create. And so that the mobility of attracting young adults is a completely different thing. And then we know also that from a great National Association of Realtors study, that people are picking a smaller house on a smaller lot because they want to be able, in exchange for a big house on a big lot, because they want to be able to walk to things. That opportunity to walk to get a cup of coffee or the quart of milk, gallon's a little heavy. You know, you want to make sure that people are valuing that and actually voting with their feet and with their dollars to do that. And then we know from AARP that as the population is aging, they're looking more for walkable, small communities to live in. Right, so the trend is moving in your direction. People are looking for places just like Grants Pass and Grants Pass's downtown. And then there's this great study that's one of my favorite called Soul of the Community. Not just because I believe every community has its own unique soul, but it did a study looking at small and medium-sized towns, predominantly in the South and Midwest, and asked the question, why do people stay here? What ties them to the place? Is it a job opportunity, economic opportunity? It was none of those things. They found that it was 3 different factors that tied people to place. One is that they felt that the place is inclusive. 2, they felt there were places to gather. They could come together with their neighbors. And the 3rd is that there's an aesthetic beauty about the place. The buildings, the natural environment, it's different in different places. But those 3 things were what tied people long-term to a place. And you can think about what kind of assets Grants Pass has feeding into that. And then there's also this crazy thing called self-employment. I'm sure none of you know anything about that here. It doesn't seem to be a predominant thing in this region at all. But we've seen a lot of the trend increase because of the recession. If you lost your job and you needed to find a way to make money, you were then suddenly self-employed. But we're seeing a continuation in this trend. And to some degree, it might be because you can buy health care as an individual now. But I think we're also seeing an independent spirit in the country of people wanting to figure out something for themselves and as a way to be a part of a community. In some of the bigger communities, we're seeing a trend towards headquarters of major corporations moving back into downtown. They're moving into towns, big and medium, because their employees want to be in a place where they can walk to get to stuff. They want to be in a place that has a vibrancy to it. And this is something to think about longer term. And we're seeing investors, real estate investors, gravitate towards walkable neighborhoods. That's where their money is going. And then there's this crazy thing called the maker movement. Anybody know anything about it? Heard of it? Like I said, this is interactive, folks. Anyone heard of the maker movement? Okay, thank you. You guys are making this hard. The maker movement is this crazy idea that it's cool to make stuff. I love it. And it's about teaching kids and teaching adults how to make things, right? This is about making food, this is making jewelry, this is making things with wood, with metal, with electronics. Doesn't matter what the medium is, but it's about that exploration of using tools and thinking in creating a tangible product. And it's maturing. It's been around for a while. It's maturing so that we're now starting to see businesses grow out of the maker movement, where businesses are making products more in the US than before, right? And these businesses, like I said, they're small scale. They're mostly 20 people or less, but they can sell nationally and internationally, right? We have this crazy thing called the internet that works in most places most of the time. And so you can create a product in one place and you can sell it retail or wholesale all over the place. And this is a very important asset for our local small-scale manufacturing community. There are all sorts of websites that are out there now to facilitate this process. Yes, they facilitate it by making some money off of it, but they do actually provide a great service. So Makers Row is predominantly about textiles and textile production. Etsy is a crafts-made website. But they started a wholesale side because they want to help the small producers actually sell in larger quantities. Custom Made is predominantly about wood products and wood design products. Opportunity Threads is actually a little bit of a curveball on the screen. They are a cooperative textile manufacturing space. 20 people, worker owned, right? There's so many different models that are out there that we can look at now. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about who are these businesses, because I think it's important to think about it. And I want you to try to think about it, who you know in this community who is a small scale producer. Some of you are sitting next to them, I know. But there are a lot of them. And as I had a little bit of free time today and I wandered around downtown, just going into some of the stores that I hadn't had a chance to meet with and personally with yet, and found a whole bunch more that I didn't even know were here. So I'm sure that might be the case for you too. The first one I will put in front of you is called a maker space. This is a very specific thing, and I don't throw around terms loosely. Maker space is a specific thing where there is space. There's a place with tools. Tools are shared. You buy a membership, and you can use those tools, like a gym, except you go to this one, unlike a gym. And so in this case, it might have wood tools, it might have textile tools, it might have this is a CNC router, a 3D printer. And the idea of a makerspace is providing people with the training to use the tools so that they don't hurt themselves or the tools, and educating people about not only how to use the tools, but how to make stuff. So it's really with the purpose of access, public open access to a lot of hobbyists, honestly, for the most part. And also that connection to be able to teach people how to create products. Some of them move in the direction of business development classes as well, to try to move into the pipeline from concept to product. But this is open to the public specifically. Then there's this idea called shared kitchens. There's this, well known by having Kia here. There also shared textile shops or shared wood shops. This is more or less where one business pulls together some resource, be it a kitchen or two, or a bunch of wood shop tools, and they allow other small businesses, specifically small businesses, to come in and pay a fee to use those tools. And it's a great way for a small business who's using that space to have an added income source, right, from the small businesses, as well as mentor them a little bit along the way. This one is actually one in Los Angeles called LA Prep that does a huge amount of training and workforce development as well. There's one in DC called Union Kitchen that does no training. It's just the kitchen, but they actually will provide you with a distribution service where they take some fee off the top. But they really try to figure out the efficiencies that are needed by these businesses to be more successful. And you pay by the hour and you use the space and you come and go. The next grouping I suggest to you is called the maker industries. These are also our artisans or our craftspeople. You can pick the name that you like. Katie is on the left. She makes leather bags in a 450 square foot space where she has a little storefront, a little retail shop in the front, and it's open to where she does her production, so she can staff her store and do her production at the same time. On the right is Keith. He's here in town. This is Rogue Cycles. He's got 5,000 square feet, which is a little different because he has a whole nother concept he's pursuing to bring in a lot of retail. But he's also a maker industry. He's one person who does this detailed custom painting and fabrication of bicycles, right? Think about this, the artisan side of it, and it might be at a very small scale, what I call micro retail, or it might be people starting to use a bigger space because they want to integrate it with other concepts, like Rogue Cycles, which wants to have, I believe, beer and wine on site. Then there's small manufacturing or production. These are the businesses that are starting to scale, folks that need 1,000 or 2,000 square feet if you're thinking about the real estate side of it. They might be doing food processing or production for sale. These are generally folks that are doing wholesale at a much larger rate. And then we have really production at scale. So this is the hall, obviously, which has been one of my 2 home away from homes while I've been here, that and Mimosa. Right, they do their own beer production. Now they don't do it on site, but they sell it on this site, right? And so when we think about how do businesses who are doing production scale, but still play a role in downtown, it starts maxing out at about 5,000 square feet for a town this size, right? As opposed to the businesses that are doing production that are in your industrial park, right? The sinks and the ceramics and the tiles and the beads that are in industrial spaces because they're just at a much bigger scale, right? And thinking about the different roles that different kinds of businesses can make or have in the community. So Main Street, what does this all have to do with Main Street, and why am I talking about these businesses? Well, the thing about Main Street or downtown is that nobody ever thinks about production businesses. Well, other than me, right? We have Main Street, people think about restaurants or some retail. Maybe there's office space upstairs. If you're lucky, you might start getting some residential downtown, some apartments. That's exactly what you guys need. Nobody ever thinks about what else we can do to diversify. What other kinds of businesses can we bring in that help diversify the types of businesses in our downtown and our Main Street? And small scale manufacturing is one of those businesses that can either be in a storefront space or in a back of alley space, but bring more jobs and more energy to a downtown and to a Main Street. So I'm going to talk about Main Street for just a couple minutes. You're going to have to bear with me because I'm going to talk through some of the details in these pictures that I really want you to think about, because for Main Street and for a downtown to work, it's not just about the businesses, but it's about what it looks like between the businesses and the streets and the sidewalks. So there's 4 principles of Main Street, and this is true of downtowns in general, of a small downtown in general. 1 is organize. That means organize the building owners, the property owners, the businesses in the downtown. They should be able to talk to each other and have common goals. What do we want out of our downtown? What kind of services do we need? How do we promote ourselves as a community of businesses in a downtown? And that's what a Main Street program does. But if you look at the picture, beyond organizing the businesses, you see very organized space, right? We see a coherent line of buildings. We see this open sidewalk with street trees and light poles, and then we see on-street parking. And all of that layering of the space is actually very important for a downtown and a Main Street, because the people need to feel welcome to walk along the sidewalk, and a wide sidewalk is key to that. They also need to feel safe. And so having the trees and the light poles and the on-street parking between them and the cars is the key combination that makes people feel safe on a Main Street. And so we need to think about how we organize that space too. The second is to promote. And I actually think there's a fair amount of this going on. That's about events and programming, right? And how to make the place active and inviting. And you can see the people along the side walking through this space, and you can see, if you look at it carefully, you can actually see the parking meters are along the left-hand side. So this is obviously a street that they've closed off for an event where the people feel comfortable enough walking through it. But it's that same thing where you have the light poles and the street meters protecting the people who can walk on the sidewalk when the street isn't closed. And then there's the design. And so this is the design about all of the different parts of it. right? There's the ability to have designing of the sign that says you're in downtown. Is it on all of the streets and all of downtown so you have a coherent sense of the place? Are the buildings kept up? You have an amazing program here that I know has expired, the facade improvement program that the city had that helped people make improvements and look at the new design for taking old buildings' facades back to what they once were when they'd been covered up in the 60s and 70s with weird siding, right? Really helping communities figure out how to look at the design of the buildings, how to help the building owners look at it and make it a high quality. People love being in a place that feels coherent and clean and put together. But we need to pay attention to the details here too, right? We see the sidewalks coming out for where the person is crossing the street. We see the really well-striped crosswalk. And this makes sure that both the people walking as well as the cars know that this is a shared space, right? This is a space where people will be crossing the street. And because the sidewalks come out from the two sides, it makes the person crossing the street feel more protected and safer about walking around the neighborhood. And it also slows down the traffic, which I know might not be the right idea to some people, but when you are those retail businesses or those production businesses along the street, you actually want those cars to slow down just a little bit more so they can stop and take a look. And as a person walking along the street, we know that that's important for safety reasons. And then fourth is diversify the economy. So this is looking at what are all the different kinds of businesses that are in the area, on the main street, in the downtown. How do we get as many different types of businesses there, really curating our community, right? What do we need to attract? What are we missing? What would be great to have? What do I want to have down the street? Can I find one of those businesses and bring them here? And thinking through those kinds of pieces. And again, check the details, right? We have the sidewalks, we have the street trees, a little bare in this picture, honestly. We have the on-street parking, there's the striping for the bikes, and then we have these narrow lanes. We have these thin lanes for the cars, so they can still come through, but we're creating this shared space. So we know that this is both for people walking around, biking around, and then driving through the area all together. So why is it important to look at this detail? And the answer is it really means getting the right outcomes. Looking at the details, both of the businesses and the business types and the way the space is put together is that combination that makes the biggest difference. So I'm going to give you just a few reasons why. One, that safe access, making people feel safe walking around an area, helps strengthen the local economy. And I'll give you a little bit more about that. We have a great study from Washington State that shows that when the community and the city got together at the beginning for rural communities and thought about what the street and the sidewalk needed to be for a main street at the beginning, and thought through all the things like sidewalks and safe crossings and on-street parking, they actually saved money in the process because they did one thoughtful investment. We also know that these slower speeds save lives. So when cars are going at 20 miles an hour through a neighborhood or through a main street versus 40 miles an hour, the incidence of a car hitting a person, the impact of that on whether or not that there's a fatality or the person lives is an enormous difference, right? At 20 miles an hour on average, 8.5, right? People will live, while at 40 miles an hour, only 1.5, right? So where we want to have people, we need to be very thoughtful of how we quite purposefully slow down the traffic so that it is a safe place for everybody. And then we also know that the more people can walk for their daily needs, the healthier the community can be. I'll harken back to the gym membership. I used to do a lot of work with the American Public Health Association, and Dr. Benjamin's the head of it, always talked about how it's not access to a gym that's important. It's actually access to passive recreation. It's walking to school. It's getting the chance to walk to get a cup of coffee or walk to see a friend. It's that activity, that passive activity, that's really important for keeping us and our communities healthy. And the more that we're thinking about integrating that into all that we do, the healthier our communities have the opportunity to be. And then there was this great study done, well, honestly, it's by my old organization, Smart Growth America, so I'm a little biased, but they did a great study looking at places that did these kinds of improvements with the sidewalks and the streets and the really protecting the people walking and biking and creating a shared space. And there were a couple cities that kept information from before and after. What was going on with the jobs and the businesses and the property values. And the folks that collected information found that it actually made a difference. It made a difference that these improvements attracted more jobs, more businesses to the area, higher sales in those places, and increased property values. So thinking about all of the details about the businesses in the places and that space in between is very important for the community. So what's the opportunity? Woo, going fly. The opportunity is really about doing this, thinking about how to mix these maker industries, these small-scale producers, back into downtown. Not really, in the case of Grants Pass, it's not mixing it back into the downtown because it's already here. It's how do we add more of it? How do you keep emphasizing that great theme in downtown? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what's going on in other places that might help some of the thinking going on here. Vorme is a new clothing company. They make outdoor clothing. Lately, I've felt like I'm their advertiser because I keep using them as one of my examples. They invented some new cloth that's great for outdoor stuff. And they are based in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, population 2,000. They have a very interesting business model. It's a distributed production model. They contract with little textile producers in a whole bunch of little mountain towns to produce all sorts of different products of theirs. So there's a 20-person textile production space here and a 20-person one there, and they get them to specialize on different products. And those textile producers also have other clients. They're producing for all sorts of people, but they see this as a benefit because they want to invest in the Rocky Mountain West. And it gives them that ability to get more of one thing or less of another thing as they need to respond to the market, but all keep it within the region so that they can check on the quality and the customization and all those details. And this is, I think, a model we'll see in other things as well. Second is Pattern. This is a nonprofit in Indianapolis. They work to showcase and to champion the fashion industry in Indianapolis. I didn't know there was a fashion industry in Indianapolis until I got there, but they're actually an amazing group of people. And they have meetings once a month for the community of people who produce different fashions and textile products to come together and share what they've learned and do business development. But they also have a storefront. And the nonprofit curates the storefront to showcase the products from different businesses in Indianapolis. And they've proven themselves so much so that the city this past year invested some community development block grants, some of the federal money that they get, into a public-private partnership with a local real estate developer to rehab part of an old manufacturing building into a shared makerspace that will predominantly have textile tools in it, because they really want to grow that part of the business sector. Third is Zeke's. You guys have already figured this out. Zeke's is in DC, don't hold it against me. Zeke's is on actually a little main street called Rhode Island Avenue in Washington, DC. Rhode Island Avenue fell on really hard times for a very long time. It only got organized a year ago to have a main street program like what I described. Zeke's was one of the first ones in. Zeke does coffee roasting. Zeke's was in a production space with no connection to the community and only did wholesale. And then they decided that they wanted to have a connection to the community. They wanted to be able to have a way to contribute to the neighborhood as well. And they took this space. Their coffee shop is in the front, maybe quarter of the space, and their coffee roasting is in the whole rest of the building. And that way they get to be a part of the neighborhood, and they get to do their production for their wholesale as well. And this is a model that any downtown can use. And then the last one, I know it's Brooklyn, I'm sorry, but they're doing some cool stuff. This is a private project called Industry City. It's really big. We won't talk about that part of it. But they're doing something really cool in that the property owner has realized that they need a reason for people to be there, right? They want foot traffic. And so they are giving discounted leases to food producers on the ground floor as long as they open a retail front, because they want to give people in the area a reason to come out and be in the space, and they know that food is often that reason. Not always, but often. So there are a lot of things changing, right? There's demographics changing, the food production, the way we sell products that we're making, and it is an enormous opportunity, but it's all very, very recent, right? All of this is happening in the last 2 years. It's really changed in a big way. So why is this important? Right? There's the Main Street reasons. We talked about the streets and the safety and the economic stuff, but there's really, why is it important to bring the manufacturing, the small scale manufacturing in? 3 reasons. I know I'm doing lots of lists tonight. 3 reasons. 1, people as an amenity. The people, we are an amenity to our own community. Grants Pass has a whole bunch of amazing events that I've been learning about while I've been here, right? Why do we have events? It's because we want to come together. We want to see each other. When we come together, we add to the energy and to the fun of living in the place that we are. The people are the amenity of a place, and small-scale producers have an amazing ability to bring people together because they can showcase what they're making, right? And they can have that interactive ability that people can come and see the cool thing being made, buy it if they want to, but also be a part of a festival of production. The second reason is economic resiliency. And this is an important one to think about because small-scale production has the ability to do that wholesale, right? It's not dependent just on the locality, but it can sell all over the country and the world. And the more that we have local businesses that are grown from our own community members or people who put down nice deep roots in our community, well, we can grow a whole bunch of small businesses in our community so that we don't have the boom and bust, right? If we attract the big business and it stays for 5 years for some tax incentive and then it leaves again, that's a boom and a bust, right? How do we have more of that growth of a whole bunch of the 5, 10, 20 person businesses that are going to be here for 20, 30, 40 years? And then the third reason is local power. There's a great energy all over the place about buying things made in our community. I was going through stores today. I hope nobody was, reporting it or anything. I was going through stores today looking for tags that said made in Grants Pass, right? And I went into the kitchen store. What's it called? Kitchen Company. The Kitchen Company, right? And I'm looking around, I'm looking at all different stuff, and I came across cutting boards that said made in Grants Pass. So I start taking pictures of it. There's amazing things that are made in all of our communities, and people really take a pride in buying things that are made in their community. And it's great, right? And we have the ability to feed into that even more because that's not going to go anywhere. So even though all these things are rosy, I want to make sure we're realizing that this is not the easiest thing in the world to do. In most communities, there is no municipal support for this part of our business sector because most people haven't ever thought about it before. The industry itself doesn't necessarily have an identity, although some communities are starting to do a made in wherever campaign. The businesses themselves don't necessarily have peer support, people who are doing production, people who are trying to figure out wholesale. Doesn't matter what it is you are selling wholesale, probably can learn something from each other. And there's very little partnership across different cities trying to figure it out, although that's starting to change. And then in many communities, there's just a limited availability of leases of good spaces where production can happen. So I do want to talk a little bit about how do we make it happen, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So how do we create it? We have to get the building right. I mean, it's not just the building, it's actually the building in the street. Right, this is the stuff I talked about with Main Street, about how do you have a cohesive set of buildings. You have gorgeous, old, historic, brick, beautiful windowed buildings in this city. How do you not only continue to invest in those, but ensure that as some of the older properties, maybe from the 50s and 60s, that aren't quite as contributing of a property, as those are invested in, and revitalization happens and people want to rebuild something on those properties, how do you make sure it actually meets the high quality of what's there already? How do you make sure that the on-street parking and the street lights expand to cover all that is downtown now, not just all that was downtown 10 years ago? Next, how do we finance it? Money. This is hard, right? Every small production business, every small scale manufacturer has a hard time getting a space, rehabbing a space, getting capital for enough materials, getting capital for the next piece of machinery they need to get. It's really a hard part of this, let alone folks that want to try to buy their own building, which a number of folks in this community have done. There's these, and I can talk about them, but there's also Hatch Oregon, which is a great new program that started this year in Oregon, where a small business in Oregon can put a public offering out, where people can literally buy almost shares in the business from residents in Oregon, so that they can get capital from the community and from folks in the state to be able to invest in it. And there's other ones as well. Then there's connecting to your history. This area has a huge history of production, right? There's all sorts of skills in the community of people who have done different kinds of food engineering, metal engineering. I don't even know what the engineering is with beading, but all sorts of processing and all sorts of inventiveness that is in this community. How does the community continue to build on that skill set and connect it up with new technology? Is there a way to help some of the local producers who may not want a retail space, but boy, do they want to do more wholesale? Is there a way for some part of the community to come together and help really showcase that opportunity and help folks get in that direction? And then fourth is supporting business development. There are a lot of different ways communities can support business development. The Small Business Development Center has an amazing number of programs and has helped a lot of small businesses in the area. And that's a very important asset for everyone in the production community to know about. But what else is there? What else needs to happen? Does the community need a small maker space that helps people with business development? What else is out there that needs to happen in terms of supporting those businesses? And then the fifth is program for it. I think you guys have figured this one out. Programming ways, events, programming activities, bringing people out of doors to really be in the downtown, be around the producers so that they know and they are proud of the production that's going on in the community. One of the things that I do, and I know it's a bit of a malady of the job, is whenever I go places, I come back home and I say, you wouldn't believe the thing I saw being made in Grants Pass, and you know, it might be fudge, it might be glass, it might be, I have a tendency to gravitate towards the breakable or the edible things. But, you know, how do you make sure that people can, every resident here is an ambassador of the city, right? How do you make sure that the community knows that this is part of what is Grants Pass? And how do you get the business community to work together to continue to showcase it? And how does the city or the residents continue to champion that as it goes forward? And so with that, I will finish talking at you and take questions.